Dear students, as I was discussing with you the clause, I discussed with you the clause and the main clause. What's a clause and what is the main clause, or we can say the principal clause or the independent clause. In today's lecture, I will discuss with you one more type of the clause, that is subordinate clause or dependent clause. As you are now aware about that, uh, main clause or independent clause, it functions on its own to make a meaningful sentence and looks much like a regular sentence, or we can say a main clause represents a complete thought. As I said in the definition of the clause, a clause is a group of words having a subject and a predicate, and it represents a complete thought. Today I am discussing with you the subordinate clause or dependent clause. Dear students, a dependent clause can't function on its own, and it leaves an idea or thought unfinished. Here you should know this point very clearly, that a dependent clause or subordinate clause can't function on its own, and it leaves an idea or a thought unfinished. Moreover, a dependent clause alone can't form a complete sentence. So, it is impossible for a dependent clause or subordinate clause to form a complete sentence on its own. Therefore, this dependent clause or subordinate clause, it needs some helpers which we called subordinators. Dear students, these subordinators, they do the work of connecting the dependent clause to another clause to complete the sentence. So we can say that in dependent clause, they need the help of subordinators, by which we can say that they complete the sentence or they represent then a complete thought. Dear student, in each of the dependent clause, the first word is subordinator. Remember this point? In each of the dependent clause, the first word is subordinator, and these subordinators include relative pronouns, conjunctions, and noun clause makers. So these subordinators, helpers, connectors, they include relative pronouns, conjunctions, and noun clause makers. So in order to represent a subordinate clause or dependent clause, we can say that there is a subordinate conjunction, then subject, then the verb, and it is equal to incomplete thought. Now here are some examples, dear students. If you win the award, look at this very part of the sentence, or we can say this sentence, if you win the award. Here it represents a subordinate clause. Similarly, since the sun will shine today, this also represents the subordinate or dependent clause. When she was sick, this also represents a dependent clause or a subordinate clause. Now let us complete their thought. Now let's connect them. For example, if you win the award, I will buy a new video game. Okay? Similarly, since the sun will shine today, we will go to beach. When she was sick, her teacher gave the exam. So, dear students, these subordinate clauses, they require the help of coordinators to complete their thought, or they depend on the main clause, or we can say the principal clause or the independent clause for their complete thought, for their complete meaning. Dear students, a subordinate clause can act as an adjective, adverb, or noun. The adjective clause can also be referred to as a relative clause. An adjective clause begins with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. Dear students, the relative pronoun or relative adverb may function as the subject of the clause. So, here you got what is a subordinate clause and how it works and how it exists. I hope that you got it here. Dear students, I am discussing the clause with you people in order to make easier for you people how to convert a simple sentence into a complex. Similarly, a complex one into a compound, or we can say a compound into a simple, or from complex to simple. Okay, so I think it's okay for you. Thank you very much.